Glazed meatloaf is one of those retro recipes that can teach us a lot. In fact, almost 10 years ago, I developed a turkey meatloaf recipe. It's just ground turkey that's been seasoned and bound with some egg. There's onions and oats in there for moistness and flavor. But the thing that makes it so popular, it's this glaze. There's lots to like about this ketchup glaze. It's easy to make and use. You just stir together ketchup, sugar, vinegar, and hot sauce, give it a brief simmer, and then you brush it on the loaf. It gives a glossy appearance, and even a thin coating brings that classic meatloaf flavor. It's sweet and tangy up front with just enough spice from the hot sauce to punch everything up. Now, a great glaze, it's not quite enough. You also have to cook whatever it is you're glazing really gently, and when it comes to applying that glaze, 2 coats are better than 1. Using what I learned from working on this meatloaf recipe, I designed glazes that work like a ketchup glaze, but without using the ketchup. They're a great way to dress up quick cooking proteins like pork chops and salmon. They're gonna make weeknight cooking so much easier. When you take a bite of meatloaf, you get a good amount of meat and just a little bit of glaze. That little bit, it needs to be enough to flavor the entire bite. And unlike a sauce, you don't have the option of adding more. That's why a glaze has to be really punchy and it has to stick to whatever it's flavoring. I bet you can open up your fridge or pantry and find at least a couple of sauces or condiments that are intensely flavored. But intense flavor isn't enough. A glaze has to be thick and clingy. Thin sauces like Worcestershire have big flavor, but they're just too runny. Obviously, most sauces would just run right off the tops and sides of whatever it is we're glazing. You see a lot of recipes for glazes that are based on jams or jellies. When you're making them, they're thick, they're clingy, they have great concentrated flavor. But as soon as that glaze sees heat, it slides right off. You end up with a sauce, not a glaze. The reason is jams and jellies get their body from pectin, and pectin melts when heated. So what we need is full flavored ingredients that are thick and sticky and that won't melt when heated. Let's look at 2 glazes that check these boxes in very different ways. First up, spicy gochujang-glazed pork chops. I found that gochujang and miso gave me the thick, sticky, flavorful base I needed. This is so much thicker than ketchup that I actually had to thin it out some to get it to the right consistency, and that gave me a chance to use punchy ingredients like soy sauce, maple syrup, and some orange juice. I want to add a little bit of minced garlic here too, just for some depth. And we'll give this a quick stir. And then it's ready to go. I mentioned gentle cooking earlier. Now, here's why that's important. You could sear a pork chop till it's beautifully crusted and then brush that glaze on. But look at what happens when you do. After just a 5-minute rest, that glaze is already mixing with the juices from the pork and it's thinned out so much that it's gonna slide right off. Like, that's no good. We're trying to make a glaze, not a sauce. Here's the thing about cooking meat. The hotter it gets, the more those fibers are gonna tighten and squeeze juices out. So when you sear a pork chop, or really any piece of meat, the surface is gonna get well above 200 degrees. Otherwise, you wouldn't get any browning. And even that area about a 1/4 inch below the surface, it's gonna get up to at least 170. Of course, the juices are gonna be flowing all over the place. What we wanna do instead is to cook the meat while keeping the temperature at the surface as low as possible. By sacrificing browning, we get a juicier chop with a glaze that stays put. To do this, we're gonna use a 275-degree oven. The chops are gonna sit on a rack so that they can cook evenly from all sides. Otherwise, that bottom part that's touching the metal pan, it's gonna get too hot. One last trick. I'm only brushing half of that glaze on now. In the oven, as that meat cooks, the glaze is gonna dry down and it's gonna get a little tacky. And that's gonna give you this really nice sticky base coat that the second layer of glaze can really cling to. Now that these chops are 5 degrees or so away from being done, I want to brush on a second layer of glaze. These are just gonna go under the broiler. I wanna put a little char in there to accent their flavor, and then they'll be good to go. All right, let's give this a try. I really love this glaze. It's spicy, it's sweet. You don't need a ton to flavor each bite, and it's so easy. Of course, there's more than one way to approach glazing. Let's make a glaze that looks totally different, but behaves in the same way for some salmon fillets. I'm starting with intensely flavored ingredients. I have red wine vinegar, maple syrup, soy sauce, and some liquid smoke. Now, I know I told you that runny liquids don't really work for a glaze, and that's true, but you can make them work with this one trick. So to get the viscosity I'm after, I want to use a little bit of cornstarch. You could use cornstarch to thicken any number of ingredients to make a glaze. I actually developed 2 other glazes for salmon that are based on this method. There's a cider and ginger one and a lemon and thyme one, and you can find those recipes either for 2 or for 4 at americastestkitchen.com or in the ATK app. This is just going to take a minute or 2 to cook out, and I want to be stirring constantly so that we don't get any lumps. I'll know it's done when this glaze is clear. That clarity, though, it also means we should care about the appearance of the fish beneath the glaze. I want to put some color on the salmon before glazing, but I also want that color to get there quickly. That'll prevent juices from leaking out and messing with the glaze. To get that extra boost of browning, I'm using sugar, but instead of sprinkling it on the fish, which is going to make that browning spotty, I just put the sugar in a brine along with some salt and drop the salmon in. The brining only takes 15 minutes, and to help with that browning, I'm going to make sure I pat these dry. I'm searing the salmon in a little oil just until it's got beautiful color. Great. So at this point, I just want to turn the heat down to low and get my first layer of glaze on. So these are going to go into a low oven where the fish is going to finish cooking. Now that the salmon's cooked through, I'm going to give it one more coating of glaze. You want to make sure you're avoiding cross-contamination. To do that, you just want to divide that glaze in half and then use a clean brush to apply that final coat. I really love the lacquered finish that this glaze gives the fish. It's just so sparkly. How beautiful does this look? It's nice, it's glossy, you don't have any of that albumin leaking out the side. Gotta give this a try. Ooh. The really lovely thing about this is there's just enough vinegar in there to cut the richness of the salmon. It's a little sweet from the maple syrup, and the liquid smoke kind of enhances that smokiness, but it doesn't take over. It's awesome. Next time you're looking for a quick way to dress up a meal, try one of these glazes or make up your own. Be sure your glaze is potently flavored, thick, and clingy. Use a gentle cooking method and glaze twice to make sure that glaze stays where you put it.